Welcome to Beauty as a Birthright, a podcast that explores awakening our six senses: touch, smell, sight, hearing, taste, and intuition through embodied Daoist practices. I'm Dr. Tamsin Lee, a Daoist metaphysical expert and founder of Elemental Archetypes, sharing face reading, Batsa astrology, and seasonal living.
And I'm Dr. Paige Yang, owner of an integrative health clinic in Honolulu and founder of Yang Face, a culturally appreciative Chinese facial tool brand. Join us on our personal journeys as we navigate the complexity of inner, outer, and relational beauty. We'll chat about how awakening our beauty through the six senses impacts our relationship to aging, childhood trauma, romantic relationships, motherhood, dating, careers, and so much more.
Let's awaken our senses and explore beauty as a birthright.
So, moving into the snake, if you feel ready.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So tell me what now we touched on kind of like the main themes of the snake, but I want to go a little bit more personal and what we are envisioning or intending for ourselves for this year and how we're really trying to set ourselves up to live that out or get the most out of it.
For me, it's actually what we were just talking about the multiple truth exists at the same time. Because it's like I'm just learning that now, like right now. And just because you experience something, like let's say we both experienced something, we both saw a show. Your perception of that show is one way, my perception of that show is another way. Like both, it can exist, both can be true at the same time. And I think I'm just realizing that I have a right to say that, oh, but that wasn't my experience. This is how I perceived it. And I think I've been around people who've told me, no, but that's not true, because this is how I perceived it. And I get into that stage of, yesterday I realized that I think I know it's very hard for me to say this, but I know that I have people pleasing and codependency issues, but it plays out very differently than how like society tells us what those look like. Because when I used to read about that, I'm like, that's not me. I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't do that. But it's a different form. It takes on a different form for me. And so in that situation, like, it's not because I want them to feel comfortable and that's why I'll agree, but it's more like this excess over the top empathy, which then isn't real. That makes me think like, oh yeah, I deny my experience and then I just accept their experience.
So you mean you too quickly try to jump into their shoes?
Exactly.
And then be like, but in doing so, you're kind of abandoning where you came from.
Totally. Yeah.
And your view on it.
I'm too understanding.
Yeah. So in what ways? So that, I think how that's been helpful feels obvious to me, but how has that like really harmed you in your relationships?
Oh, so many ways. That is like a perfect bait for a manipulator, especially somebody or a covert narcissist who shares their vulnerabilities and then weaponize their vulnerabilities. So I can speak of my last romantic relationship where he used his trauma. There are certain types of trauma that really like catches me. If you've experienced racial trauma, that is an easy way to catch me, because that's something I'm very sensitive to. And so he had experienced racial trauma and kind of like dumped this on me way too early, like really inappropriate boundaries. But I caught on to that. And so later when we would have discussions about race, because when he was younger, he had brown skin and he appeared more like a person of color. He's mixed race. but as an adult, he passes as white completely.
Okay.
And so that is something I've learned when mixed race people pass as white. And it's a massive privilege. And then you have to understand it's a privilege because the whole world sees you as white. And so you may not experience the world as white, but everybody treats you as white and you gain the same privileges. And so whenever we would have like race talks, you know, he would bring it back to that trauma when he was younger and had brown skin and looked more like a person of color. And so then I would deny what I just experienced, which was a racial microaggression or racial assault that was directed to me. I would deny that to comfort him. And because it's like, oh, right, you're also a person of color. But it's like, no, bro, you're not. You are, but not how the world sees you. And it's such a fine, subtle thing that I really had to unpack and really, you know, had to go deep with myself. And I think that's very much like the snake. I feel like Dragon Year was all about big problems and destruction. And now the snake is going to be all about the subtleness, like the details of all these things. That makes it much more complex to understand.
Right. But what you also, maybe not that specific example with him, but what you also share reminded me of this, of what you're just saying, that two things can be true at once. And so someone can experience that hardship and you can too. And maybe not in that example, but in another, one won't be more significant than the other. So you don't have to betray yourself in putting the other person's experience above yours.
Yeah.
And making yours smaller. And like that doesn't serve anyone except for people like a narcissist, like what you were saying.
Yeah. And I would tell him that. Like I would say, I'm not denying your experiences, your racial trauma that you had experienced in your life. But you have to understand that in this moment, you didn't experience it. I did. And so this is a completely different, but he couldn't understand that. And he's very like, very much a narcissist where it's just so dramatic and so emotional. So it's like you have somebody who is like constantly screaming at you and then telling you like, you know, whatever. So then of course I'm gonna be like, oh right, okay, maybe it's my fault. Da, 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 da. But then I'm like, wait a minute. I just like was
like,
very
what just happened?
Exactly. You know?
You're like, this is weird. I came back sharing a really difficult experience and suddenly I'm comforting somebody else. What happened?
Yes. That was it. That was the whole relationship for everything.
Like,
and not only that, it's like
so twisted.
Not only that, it's like, oh, and it's also my fault. Everything is my fault.
Oh.
Everything in your life
my God.
now my fault. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, how are you working on this? Or
I'm plotting revenge. No, just kidding. I do feel like the sinister snake side come in. Did I tell you? I don't know if this is an appropriate story now, but there is this like sinister kind of snake quality that I feel the energy coming. Are you feeling that?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about this.
I mean, I think, so many cultures share similar sayings. And I think it's no coincidence that there are sayings in many cultures that talk about like the cunning snake, or like they're such a snake, like conniving and sneaky. And I don't think that all snakes are like this, of course, but there is frequency, a quality to them that can include this. And when was it? It probably was in November, end of October, early November, when I felt this like creepiness.
Ooh.
And I had felt something similar going into 2020, in the sense that something was like upon us. And then, of course, we soon found out that, oh, COVID was upon us. But this feels like something else is here. And I don't know what, but it feels a little sneaky. I don't know if it's gonna just be like aliens finally hanging out and being shocked that nobody's that interested in them, or if it's like, so I don't know, but like there's something like brewing. What do you think though? It sounds like you felt something too, or you are feeling something.
Yeah, but it's just to me. You always feel like this macrocosmic energy. You're feeling the energy of the universe. And I'm just like, it is all about me. I wonder, like, with the sneaky snake, is it them being sneaky? I think there is this like less sinister. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but like they don't show their cards. They don't show everything, and that's what I love about snake people. They don't show you everything, and so that used to trip me up all the time because I show everything in the moment, and and they don't. But I also think when a snake is imbalanced, that they do tend to, it's not seek revenge, but like a vendetta. Like you don't want to mess with a snake person, you know.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it right away. They'll wait. They'll wait, they'll watch, just like how a snake approaches its prey. It's almost like a
Mhm.
play. It's play for them. And that play is like it's very exciting for them. The actual capture, I don't think
Yeah.
that's exciting. It's literally like the psychological like play of like,
Right.
how much can I, you know, scare you or trick you or
Mhm.
yeah.
But you know what I think? I think you do get to see it all after the fact. Like when they shed their skin off and you're like, "Oh, that's what it was?" But that looked way different at the time. And it's like, "Oh yeah, it did cuz it was on me and now it's off of me." Like
Mhm.
you just like see what's remaining
Yeah.
after they're done with you or done with the, and it's like, "Oh, I don't know." Yeah, I mean, I think I don't the hard part is the snakes in my life, they have had these qualities to them. And but I also want to think about like the positive, like, what we can learn from them. And I know you and I talked a little bit about it 2 episodes ago when we were talking about the forecast for the snake. But yeah, what do you think are some other positive qualities?
I also don't think that sneakiness is I actually think of it as a positive quality.
Oh yeah, that's
In
true.
some ways, like because I think snakes, it's very different than dragon. Dragon creates a lot of chaos, and by that there is some sort of destruction, but snakes are very intentional. So sometimes when I think
Hmm.
like if they're going to seek revenge on you, maybe you did something wrong. Otherwise, I feel like
Mm,
they wouldn't waste their energy on that. Dragons have a
I
lot of
think that's
energy.
true.
They're just flying around everywhere. They got a lot of energy. Snakes do have energy, but they don't want to expend that energy. They rather be like laying around in the sun. So if they're
Hmm.
going to attack you, maybe you did something wrong.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really true. Do you think that they know when they did something wrong? I feel like they do.
The other person, the other.
When when the snake is in the wrong.
Oh, well, I meant the other person that they're going to seek revenge on is the wrong
Right, right, right.
person.
But now I'm also wondering like
Yeah.
when they're
If
in the
snakes
wrong.
if snakes in the wrong, I think it depends, but I think it's hard for them. Don't you?
Yeah. To admit it or to really believe it.
Both.
So you think that they don't see it that way?
I think it's harder for them than some of the other animals, like let's say a rabbit or a pig,
Hmm.
um, who will be able to understand I did something wrong. With snakes, I think they're very clever and smart, and they can justify
Yeah.
things in their heads. Yes, Paige,
Mhm.
I burned your house down. However, and they'll tell you the reasoning, right? And you're
However, you
some
needed a new house.
And some people will be like, "Oh yeah, it's like almost something like that lawyer quality, the
Mm-hmm.
devil's
Yeah.
advocate. They're very and smart.
So this is going to be the wood snake, right?
Yeah, yin wood
Yeah.
snake.
Okay. And then before we were recording, you were talking about vision boards. Is that what you were saying?
Oh yeah. Do you do vision boards? New Year's?
Not material vision boards.
Oh,
To the
you're
material
you
of
go into
my
the other realms, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. But
I love
it's
it.
but you were saying that you were doing vision boards.
I don't.
That felt very wood. Oh, you
I
don't, but
don't.
you
Like every new year, they're like, do a vision board. And there have been years where I'm like, I'm going to do a vision board. I'm going to collect the magazines and I'm going to do it. And I just get lazy. I never do it. And so I think there's like this resistance. And I was thinking, like, why am I like, where is this resistance? I mean, I love collages. Like, I create collage art and I do that. But and I started thinking, I was like, well, vision board has a lot to do with actual seeing. Like you're creating a board to
Mhm.
manifest something, right? And you look at this board
Yep.
and you're manifesting whatever is on that board. But to me, and that's a very wood element quality because it has to do a lot with
Mhm.
dreams, aspiration, imagination. And I think that's
Yeah.
important.
Growth.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
really important. However, it doesn't take you to that next step of doing it. Like, I'm not sure if looking at a
Mm,
board every day is going to make you do that extra step of actually doing it. And I think that doing it is
right.
other elements. And I think that's why I'm
Yes.
much more drawn to astrology because astrology teaches you how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing this quote that vision boards or that type of stuff, for a lot of people, it can just be productive procrastination,
Oh,
where they feel like because they wrote it or they envisioned it, that that was them being productive and
yeah.
working towards it. Whereas some other people will advise, don't do that. Just do it. And spend the 10 minutes you wrote a weight loss plan to go walk for 10 minutes instead, kind of a thing, you know. It's more simplified, of course, how I'm saying it. But yeah.
I also think, like,
S-
for me, it's sometimes, and maybe for everybody else actually, but sometimes you dream that you want something that may not be good for you or may not be the right time
Mhm,
for you. And I think that's what
mhm.
astrology teaches us. Astrology has a lot to do with timing, right? It's like your birth
Yep.
time, your natal chart, the moment that you're born. So everything else is in astrology is about timing. And sometimes you have to understand that what you want in life, it's not meant for right now. It may
Yep.
come later. And that act is like the more I study astrology, the more I understand surrendering. It's like there is this.
Mhm.
I always say like astrology isn't fate, meaning that just because you're born with this energy, it doesn't mean that that's how it's going to play out because we have free will and destiny. But some of it
Mhm.
is fated, like timing. Like you're not
Yep.
supposed to have it now because you got to go through all this other stuff to prepare for this
Mhm.
thing. Or just because you want it, no matter how badly you want it, it doesn't mean that you're meant to have it. And that's a hard
Yeah.
lesson to swallow because that goes against
Right.
everything of manifestation, where it's you want it, you dream it, you get it.
Yeah. Right. So yesterday in the clinic, I had a patient from Japan, and she was talking about her plans for retiring. And I just said, "Oh, let me quickly look at your Batsa chart." 'Cause she was really trying to plan. She's like, "The decisions I'm going to make in the next 2 months are going to really set me up for what the right time to retire." So while she was on the table, she gave me, some of her birth information, and then I went and did a quick look. And I came at first, when I looked at her chart, I was like, "Oh, it doesn't look like she should retire for another 4 years."
Mm.
And I was worried that I was going to tell her that, and she was going to be like, "What?" So I go in and I'm like, oh, I just want to let you know I took a look at your chart and I don't really advise moving into retirement just yet. I think you're going to want to wait another 4 years. And she felt so relieved. And I had to remember, like, she's coming from Japan, and, Japanese culture is known for spending so much time in like perfecting things and getting things right. And this humility of like, study tea ceremony for 10 years and then you can finally begin studying real tea ceremony for 30 years or whatever, right? It's just like, it's fascinating. And so I had to remember, like, oh my God, of course she was relieved that it was just 4 years. I mean, she's of retirement age. Like, it's not like, she's in her 30s and she was expecting me to say 20. But it was just this neat moment of she felt seen, and like she agreed with it immediately. And it was just looking at really quickly. I felt like I had like less than 30 seconds to take a quick look, just to look at the timing of something like that. And that was such a great example of what you're saying with this timing and astrology, and how that can be really, really helpful, even though there's a lot that she has to do with her free will in the next 4 years to make that happen. Like how she was just saying this, in this next month, she'll have to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But it was this really cool moment. And she loved it too. She was like, she's like, when I first came in here, I thought, oh, I might have to be 59. And then when we did the math, that was in 4 years. But she didn't
Wow.
tell me that, until I
Yeah.
had shared that with her.
I think
Yeah.
also about timing is that sometimes the time is like right now. You have to act right now. There's no time to
Yeah, the
waste.
window.
Yeah, right?
Mhm.
Because if you miss this opportunity, that energy will go quickly to somebody else. And I think an
Yep.
example of that is when you have an idea. Have you ever had an idea of like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this product, or I'm going
Mhm.
to do this thing, and you don't act upon it. And then a year later, that product comes out or that service comes
Yep.
out, and it's because you didn't act on it. So then it went to the next
Yeah.
person with your similar kind of chart, and they acted upon that. And so I love that you can see that in the chart, and then you can almost also play with timing, because
Mhm.
every month, day, hour brings different energy. So if you align yourself with certain times, then it's like
Mhm.
now you're in sync with the universe.
Right. Yeah. What do you think about, my grandma's little sister? I have this memory of, she loved astrology, and her and my grandma would always like read it. And
Cute.
I don't know if they got like the Hong Kong paper or something through Chinatown, where they would I don't know, maybe every month they'd get like a whole astrology thing in the paper. They read about it, they talk about it. It was so cute. It was mostly because my grandma's little sister was single her whole life. So they were really interested in it from a romantic point of view.
Oh my God, I want to hang
But
out. I wish I could have hang out with them.
I know her little sister has passed, but my grandma's still here. But I just remember one time, and I just called her auntie. She's like technically my great aunt. But she had told me not. I don't know if it was because I was young, and I'm curious what you think about this. But she told me like, um, she'd say like, "Oh, your grandma and I, it's okay for us to look at this because we're older." And she's like, "But you're so young. Don't look at yours too much." She would say that, like, "Don't look at yours too much. You're still too young." And when I was younger, I heard that as like, "Oh, is some of this inappropriate for a little kid?" But now I'm wondering if she didn't want me to do that because she felt like I had too much life ahead of me, and she didn't want it to influence my like young, like all the opportunities that lay before me. Whereas because she was like a great aunt, she was at least, I don't know the math on this, 50 plus years older than me. What do you think though? What do you think?
I
I mean, of course we
love
can't
that.
get inside of people's minds, but
No,
what
I
do you
get
think she
it.
meant by that? Or, yeah.
I think that's so smart. I think that's so
Yeah.
smart because when you're young, I think part of your life journey is to be wild, make mistakes, live off the grid, meaning live off of this natal chart. If you just obsess over what's in here, I think you miss out on certain experiences that may be challenging or obstacles or hard to deal with, but I think in some weird way, we are always like in tune with the energy of the universe and energy of our natal charts. I think it always finds their way to us, right? But
Right.
I think also when you're young, like you don't have the mental capacity to like understand this kind of stuff. I thought about it like when I looked at my luck pillar and I looked at my 20s, and that was like a peach blossom luck time period. I'm like, oh, I should have used it more. I used a lot of it. Unknowingly, right? But I had so much regret. I'm like, I should have been better. Like I should have, but if I
You should have been Brittany, bitch. No,
yeah,
joking.
but and it's not like I didn't. Like I lived to the fullest. I really used that. But I think, when you're younger, you don't have the life experiences to truly understand what all of this really means. I don't think. And I think I
Yeah.
think it's good to have older people in your life who are able to read that and kind of support you and give you little ways. So like one example is like my nephew, the rooster. I was thinking about him and his chart. And I constantly look at his chart because he has a very challenging chart. And one of the aspects of his chart is he is very hard on himself. He is a perfectionist. He works really hard. He likes to be the best. And if there's any type of failure, he takes it to his core. And that failing, and it doesn't even have to be failing. It could be like he doesn't know how to kick the ball into the goal because nobody taught him that. He takes it to his heart, and he feels like not only did he fail himself, but he failed everyone. And it's such a heaviness in
Oh,
his
wow.
chart. And I
Wow.
see
Yeah.
this play out already as a kid. And so I don't tell him that it's in his chart because he's too young. And I think even your 20s or maybe in your early 30s, you're too young. You're not going to get it. You're going to take it too much. So I give him like supportive things. Like one thing is I don't praise the results of his accomplishments. I praise how he did it. Like, and I kind of remind him like, oh, you succeeded because you did this and this didn't work. And I saw you do it this way and you tried. And like, like he has to understand what failing feels like. And he has to, in his own energy, understand that like failing is like one of your greatest gifts. If you figure out how to fail really well, then like you're unstoppable. You cannot be afraid of failing. So that's like how I use it. So I think what your grandma or your auntie said was like, that's the reason why we don't face read young people, but I never looked at it in the chart that way. And I think that's so smart.
Yeah. Another thing that because I'm playing back what she would actually say in those moments. I remember another time what she had said, and I'm working this all out live, and I want to hear what you think. Is she also, I think one time I had asked her, like, why shouldn't I be looking too much at my astrology or whatever? And then at one of the times she said, oh, it can, the word she used was like, it might diminish your luck or like change your luck or like influence your luck in a way that it seemed like she didn't want to happen to me. And I remember when I heard that, I was like, oh, there's all these Chinese superstitions. Everything's about luck and like good luck, bad luck. Like if you do that, it's bad luck. But do you think there's something to that too when it comes to like looking at Batsu too much when you're young? Like would it somehow, I don't
I think
know,
so.
drain a little bit of your luck?
I think in the same way that it limits you from living in the present moment. Like I've seen that happen. And I think that's also like for I think for all of us, we shouldn't just look at our chart constantly. It's almost like pictures of Dorian Gray, like you look at yourself in the mirror, you fall into the mirror, right? It's like there are so many mythologies of that. You shouldn't be constantly looking at yourself. because you'll
Mm-hmm.
fall into that obsession. And I think with astrology, what's really good is that, and the best way to really learn is not to look at your own chart. You can't even see it because you're so biased. You're so in the circle,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Look
You
at
interpret it so differently. Yeah.
yeah, look at everyone else's chart. And then what you're supposed to really learn from your chart is how do you evolve so that you become a better parent or a better partner or a better person, like it's to make the changes. But I've definitely seen people, even in their 30s, who are constantly living just by their chart. And they
Mm-hmm.
get so stuck in that. It's like
Yes.
everything is that. Oh, I got into an argument because this planet was here and there. And so that's the energy. And it's almost like they give up on life or accountability. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
like you should have known that, okay, that energy is coming in. So you need to pause a little bit. You need to be a little bit more patient. Da, 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 da. And I think that sort of thinking comes later in your life. And then also not
Mm-hmm.
obsessing over yourself. Like even
Yeah.
I'm always looking at other people's charts constantly, and I'll go back to my chart,
Right.
but I I'm not. Yeah, I think there's a real danger, and I think that's how I perceive luck.
Mm-hmm. That, my acupuncturist would always talk about too, like not getting stuck. Like I get super passionate about something and I go really deep into it and I go in for my session with her and I share all about it and I thought I'd have this huge spiritual awakening and she'd listen and would love it and she would like talk about her experience and then after she'd be like, but be careful, don't get too stuck on this because then you're gonna get stuck. And I'd always be like, she's like, it's not like in other words too, like that's not the end. Like, there'd be moments where I felt like I figured out the whole world and the whole meaning of life and the whole reason why we're here. And she would be like, yes, yes, yes. But also, no, don't get stuck there because it doesn't end there. And there's no way of ever knowing where it ends. And I probably brought this up in another episode, but she'd always say, like, the tip top of the tippy top is always the very bottom in some other reality. And
Oh, I
so
love
even if
that.
you, yeah, so she's like, even if you think you got it and you get it,
It's the
like,
bottom for somebody else.
and that was just her way of always being like, don't get stuck. And that's why, when my other auntie, this is my mom's first cousin, who's the recluse in the Himalayan plateau that I've talked about before.
Mhm.
And when she was telling us about the Dalai Lama flying, and I remember we were like, that's so cool. Can you fly? And all this stuff. And she had always warned us, like, don't get obsessed with flying. It's going to limit you. And I remember being like, what? Flying limit you? How does that make any sense? And it's those two truths that we were just talking about, where it's like, yes, people can fly. But yes, if they get obsessed with that ability, they'll just get stuck with only being able to fly, which I know sounds wild to hear right now. But the point being that, like, it doesn't have to end with flying. And if you think you can just fly, then you're going to close down to all the other things you might be able to do in this life
Right.
that are, yeah,
You miss out because flying, you can't
yeah,
see what's on the ground. When you're walking, it's a totally
yeah.
different experience. I also think
Mm-hmm.
like the dangers of just obsessing over your own chart is that you forget about your free will. It's just
Mm-hmm.
energy, right? And it's like you have
Yeah.
free will. You have choice in everything of how you want to use this energy. And I see people who get too stuck on astrology. It's like they think that energy controls them.
Yeah.
And then that it traps you in that way. And then you start to trap other people in that way. Where
Mm-hmm.
even when I read somebody's chart, it's like I can read the energy, but I have no idea what you're going to do with this.
Yes. The interpretations, like all the different possibilities that and how they can be interpreted, those are endless. And there's so many paths to all of those things. And so, one path, again, my acupuncturist, when this huge thing happened in her life, I think she thought she was going to move. And it ended up that her mom passed away. And like, those are two on the surface, like huge differences. But the way that she like saw her stars and the way that she interpreted it was like, yeah, now that she knows what happened, like, of course, those things, either of those could have happened, or
Yeah.
another thing. Yeah, the interpretation of it. And then you put different energies and intentions and chi into the different interpretations. And
Yeah.
that can influence the outcome too.
Yeah. And every decision you make is going to change that energy in this way, that way, this way. And
Right.
I don't think we're meant to be just living in this chart. It's like you're supposed to experience life as well and like kind of let go of that
Right.
sometimes.
Right. But the cool thing is then you can look back and then it can make so much sense, right? Like the light bulbs go off where you're like, "Oh, now that I know what did end up happening and I see it now.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes total sense." And I'm
Yeah.
so glad I didn't limit myself to think that it was going to be this one way,
Can I
because
give you a
now that
quick?
I know that it was another way, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, go on.
I'll give you a quick example of like,
Mhm.
um, so my last relationship, we had a massive clash in both of our charts. We were not meant to be together because it was going to be so destructive. And you could see that. And I saw that in the beginning, but I chose to ignore it because I don't like when people are close to me, like friends or romantic partners, I don't like to get too caught up in the face or the chart or something because I can go off the deep end. And I thought, like, well, okay, there is this clash, but clashes aren't bad. It's just depending on how we choose to use it. And so I was just being responsible for my actions. But, in the long run, like he was in a different place. So it was a very destructive relationship. However, I think looking back in hindsight, I was supposed to go through that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Had I looked at the chart and I'd been like, oh my God, there's this huge clash. We are not meant to be together. Like, this is going to
Yeah.
end very wrong. Right. And then I broke it off then. I wouldn't have
Mhm.
gone through this massive growth in Dragon Year and be ready for Snake Year for what's
Yeah.
coming in. So it's almost like I had to
Right.
go through that to really understand. And in a lot of ways, like I grew so much and you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really fascinating how you were still guided though. Like that still was a form of a guide. Even if a lot of people would have thought like, "Oh, this is supposed to guide me to not engage in this." There was something like a lot more wise in you where it was like, "I know this, but there's another part of your consciousness that knows that it needed it." And so you proceeded.
Yeah, I wish it was with a different person. So if it was
Yeah.
had it been with a different person, because you and I have a clash, right? But you and I are
Mhm.
very self-aware people, and we've done a lot
Mhm.
of work, and we continue to
Right.
do a lot of work, right? And we're very we take responsibility for our actions too. So had I been with a partner like that, I think it would have been one of the greatest relationships. I would have learned so much. We would have both learned a lot.
Yeah.
Too bad it was
But
with
I
the wrong
wondered,
person.
well, but was it, right? Is the kind of the question, because
Yeah.
it's hard to say in how many more animal cycles, or maybe even just after the snake year, that you might have a moment that's like, whoa, that actually it had to have been that sour of a person, or however you want to explain them,
Yeah, in that
to
case,
really,
I wish
yeah.
though it would have been the right person, meaning I wish it would have been a person who was also working on themselves constantly. So when the clashes
Hmm.
happen, we continue to grow a little bit, a little bit, a
Hmm.
little bit,
Yeah.
as a couple and individually. And that would have been,
Right.
I think that would have been such a beautiful experience to do that with somebody so close to you who has this intense clash with you.
Right.
I think I do that. I
Yeah.
think our relationship is like that. We don't have a big clash, but I do learn a lot because we work very
Hmm.
differently. And I think I've learned so much about communicating from working
Hmm.
with you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
again,
no.
we should be together, but we're not.
There'd be so many moments when I'm working in clinic and I'm like, oh, if Tamsin could just do this for me. Because I feel like your style would resonate really well with my current front desk. And so I like really try to think about what you've done in the past. And I'm like, all right, where do I get this spreadsheet? Like, let me, yeah. Oh, Tamsin, I love talking to you. Are there any, we're, coming up on our time here, but
What's your
any
big
other
wish? What's your
more,
big wish for snake
oh,
year?
um, oh, wow. I think it's I think it's kind of where you were for, is this where you were for Rabbit? Where it was like, or maybe even Tiger. I want to really step into some feminine power.
Oh,
And I remember that was for you a few years ago.
yeah.
And we were talking about sensuality and those parts of you. And I think I might have been in my Tiger year and I was like all prideful, like, oh, I already have that. Then now that I'm out of my Tiger year, I'm like, ooh, I really need that. So I would love that. What about for you?
We can talk more about that in another episode. We delve deep in like our
Yeah.
feminine and masculine energy. For me, I think the first thing that
Mhm.
came up when I asked you that for me was I want to feel more pleasure in life. Pleasure in
Mhm.
every aspect. Because I feel like Dragon Year, there was no pleasure. It was not a very pleasurable
Yeah.
experience, you know? And to me, pleasure is slow, it's like sensual, it moves with intention. There are these moments of like attacking, like when the snake attacks its prey. But I
Mhm.
want to really experience that and cultivate that because I think it's the first time I realized like I deserve that. After this past year, I 100% deserve to experience pleasure in as many ways as I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I love this. And we have there's some overlaps with our big wishes too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm getting masculine energy from Snake though. That I have a masculine star coming in. So it'll be interesting to explore
Mm.
this with both of us.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we can't wait for the next one then. Well, we will go deeper with these
Yeah.
feminine and masculine qualities.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone. It's
Okay.
coming
Yes.
up on
Happy New
January
Year.
29th.
Yeah. And love to all of our dragons and snakes, even if it sounded like we were a little bit critical and picking you apart. Ultimately, we've learned a ton, and I can't wait to learn more from the snake this coming year.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye. Well, that's it for today. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and give us a review to let us know how you've been navigating your beauty journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Beauty Birthright Pod and say hello.
To learn more about face reading, Batsa astrology, and seasonal living, head over to elementalarchetypes.com and follow me at Elemental Archetypes.
And to explore beauty through your own hands, visit yangface.com and follow at yang.face for tutorials, Chinese medicine theory, and candid thoughts on cultural appreciation.